Have you ever wished you could travel back in time? I mean, not just to see an old castle, but to walk the actual streets of an entire city, exactly as it was at one single moment in history? Well, today, that's pretty much what we're going to do.
It sounds like something out of a movie, right? But this really happened. We're about to dive into the incredible story of a city that was, essentially, flash frozen by nature, giving us this unbelievable snapshot of life in the Roman Empire.
So let's set the scene. Our destination is Pompeii in the year 79 AD. This wasn't some quiet little town. It was a thriving, bustling city in southern Italy. It was a really popular spot, especially for wealthy Romans, because the weather was great and the volcanic soil was perfect for growing grapes and olives. Thousands of people called this place home. So for this trip, try to forget everything you know about ancient ruins and picture a living, breathing city.
Okay, so what was a typical day actually like for someone living there? Well, our journey starts bright and early, right at sunrise.
As soon as the sun came up, the city came alive. Remember, there were no streetlights, so people had to make the most of every single minute of daylight. You can just imagine the noise as the stone streets filled up. Shopkeepers were throwing open their wooden shutters, and everybody was rushing off to get their day started.
Everyone kind of had their role to play in the morning. Breakfast was usually pretty simple, maybe some bread and fruit. After that, the men would head out to the city center to do business, while the women would stay back to manage the household. And the kids? Well, depending on how wealthy their family was, they were either off to school or already learning a trade. For the men heading out, the main destination was almost always the Forum. This was the absolute heart of the city. A huge open square, surrounded by temples and government buildings. It was the place for everything. You could trade goods, catch up on the latest news that was posted on the walls, and of course, hear all the local gossip. And with all that morning activity, if you got hungry, you didn't have to go all the way home. You could just stop at a place called a thermopylae, and you can basically think of it as the ancient Roman version of a fast food joint. The design of these places was actually so clever. They had these L-shaped counters with huge clay pots built right into them. These pots would keep all sorts of food and drinks hot, ready to serve to people who are in a hurry. Pretty smart, right?
So after a really busy morning of work and errands, the afternoon was all about relaxing and socializing. And the number one spot to do that? The public baths. Now, a trip to the baths was a whole experience. It wasn't just about getting clean. First, you might do some exercise, maybe wrestle or play some ball games outside. Then, you'd move through a series of rooms, from a cold pool to a warm one, and finally to a super hot, steamy one. It was a huge part of Roman social life. People would hang out here for hours, just catching up with friends. And to get clean, they didn't use soap. They'd have slaves rub them down with olive oil and then scrape it all off.
And have you ever wondered how they managed to heat those massive buildings and all that water? Well, they used this brilliant system called a hypocaust. It was basically an ancient form of central heating. Hot air from a furnace would flow through spaces under the floor and inside the walls, heating everything up. I mean, that is just some seriously impressive engineering for the time.
All right, so as the day started to cool down, the city was looking for a bit of entertainment before everyone headed home for dinner, which was the main meal of the day.
For the really big events, everybody would go to the amphitheater. And this place was huge. We're talking thousands and thousands of people packed in to watch gladiators fight or to see exotic wild animals that had been brought in from all over the empire. A lot of the time, these shows were actually free to the public, paid for by a wealthy citizen who was probably trying to get more popular.
So when the day was finally done, people went home. But home meant very different things depending on how rich you were. The wealthy lived in these large, airy houses called a domus. They were beautiful, with colorful paintings on the walls and intricate mosaic floors. But the city's poor citizens, they were often packed into small, dark apartments, sometimes right above a noisy workshop or tucked away in a back alley. The gap between the rich and the poor was just enormous.
A key feature in any wealthy home was the atrium. This was an open-air courtyard right in the center of the house. It was such a brilliant design because it did two things at once. It let natural light just flood into all the surrounding rooms, and it usually had a pool in the middle to collect fresh rainwater for the family to use. So we have this amazing picture of a totally normal, vibrant day in Pompeii. But on one particular day in 79 AD, that normal routine was shattered in the most terrifying way you can possibly imagine.
You see, that mountain that loomed over the city, Mount Vesuvius, well, it wasn't just a pretty backdrop. It was an active volcano. And on that day, it erupted with a power that is just impossible to comprehend.
The end came unbelievably fast. It started with a gigantic column of ash and rock blasting miles up into the sky. Then, for hours, this light volcanic rock called pumice started raining down on the city. It piled up so high and was so heavy that it caused roofs to collapse and block doorways, trapping people inside. But the final blow was a deadly, superheated surge of toxic gas and ash that raced down the mountain at hundreds of miles an hour, instantly burying the city and everyone still in it.
And just like that, Pompeii was gone. It was buried so deeply under all that volcanic material that it was completely lost to the world. People eventually forgot it even existed. For more than 1,700 years, the city lay silent and untouched.
But you know what's incredible? The story doesn't end there. The very same disaster that destroyed Pompeii also miraculously preserved it, creating a perfect time capsule.
When archaeologists finally started digging at the site centuries later, they were just blown away. The layers of ash had protected everything from air and moisture. They found buildings perfectly intact, streets with wheel ruts still visible, everyday objects left right where they were dropped, and even loaves of bread still in the ovens. And maybe most famously, they found hollow spaces in the hardened ash left by bodies that had decomposed. By carefully pouring plaster into these voids, they created these incredibly detailed and moving casts, capturing the final moments of the people of Pompeii. It is the closest we will ever get to walking through a real Roman city.
When you think about it, Pompeii gives us this unbelievably intimate look into a lost world. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If your world, your town, was instantly preserved right this second, what would it tell people thousands of years from now about how we lived? What story would your world tell?